So as we continue with this concept that there are a lot of things in life that you can't live without, there's just this reality that you can't live without wisdom. We find ourselves right here in Conway, which is known as the City of Colleges. Right now I'm on the campus of the University of Central Arkansas. Just down the road we have Hendrix College, and not far from the church we have Central Baptist College. Everywhere around us we have college students who are pursuing knowledge that will help them with the direction that their life is going. There is kind of this reality that when we're in college, we're hungry for knowledge and we're hungry for wisdom, and we might be receiving a lot of knowledge from classes and our coursework, but because of that season of life, sometimes we just lack wisdom. I think back to some of the decisions that I made when I was in college, some of the things that I did, and I might have been growing in knowledge, but I was still lacking in wisdom. When I think about wisdom, I think about it as applied knowledge tested over time. And I just didn't have the life experience when I was in college. I think back to my junior year, I had gone through a bunch of cars. At that time, I was driving a little Dodge Aries, and it was a great car, ran good, was ugly, but it ran good. The only problem was the temperature gauge on the car didn't work. It was always all the way down on cold. One day, my sister and I were driving back up to Olivet Nazarene University, and all of a sudden, the temperature gauge on the car shot from absolutely cold to peaked out absolutely hot. I looked at my sister and I said, "Hey, that's weird. The temperature gauge has never worked, and now it says the car is hot." And I kept on driving down the interstate, and the car went several more miles until finally there was a little bit of an explosion sound. The car lost compression, and then we eventually rolled to a stop as we came up on an exit. The car was done. I had blown a head gasket. That car was finished. I learned in that experience that you need to pay attention to those temperature gauges in your life. I also think back to my freshman year. It was around the time of finals for that first semester, the fall semester. We were coming up on Christmas, and we were just bored. We were kind of burnt out on studying. And one day I was sitting in my dorm room, and a guy came in and he's like, "Hey, did you know that if you pour cologne in your hand, you can light the cologne on fire?" And I think he had some Drakkar cologne that everybody was wearing then, and he put a little dab in his hand and he lit it on fire, and there was a little bit of flame, and then he shook it out and it went away right away. And I said, "Man, that's amazing. Let me try it." And so I went to my stash of cologne. I didn't really have a name brand cologne budget, but what I did have was some cologne that I had gotten at one of those stores where everything cost $1. It was inspired by Polo for Men, and I took that cologne and I doused my hand. I covered my palm and it got all over my hand. I took a match and I lit it and I threw it on my hand, and my hand went up like an inferno, and we were all like, "Oh my goodness, that's amazing." Unfortunately, when it was time to get that fire out, when I went to shake my hand out, the more I shook my hand, the more the flames flared up. I ran to the sink that was in my dorm room and started running water over my hand, but the cologne had soaked into the pores and my hand continued to burn as there was water running on it. I became known in our little circle of friends as Flaming Hand Boy for a while. When my family picked me up for that semester, my mom looked at my hand, which had experienced some healing but was bright red, and she said, "Hey, what did you do to your hand?" And I said, "Oh, I just burned it a little bit. It's not a big deal." But I lacked wisdom during that season in my life. The Bible tells us that wisdom is so important. On Sunday, we talked about Solomon as this great example of wisdom. In his book, Proverbs, he wrote repeatedly that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. It's the foundation of wisdom. It's the source of wisdom, that we would fear God and live our lives to bring him glory. Wisdom doesn't have to be elusive. It doesn't have to be something that's out of reach, because James tells us in James chapter 1 that if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously. And then he tells us that we need to take that wisdom and we need to put it into action. The reality is there are a lot of us who have a lot of Bible knowledge. We can quote Bible verses and we know all the facts. We know all the stories. We've been in Sunday school groups and small groups for years, but we've never taken our Bible knowledge, applied it to our life, and allowed God to test and prove that over a period of time. I want to challenge you to live a life that is saturated with biblical wisdom that only God can provide. When you put him first and seek him first, when you live your life according to the teaching and instruction of Scripture, you begin to find that life makes more and more sense. Things start to click at home. things start to click with your family, things start to click at work, and all of a sudden God can lead you and God can provide for you. He can grant you the wisdom that you desire when you seek it in Him. There are a lot of things that you can't live without, and you might look around you and it seems that a lot of people are living without wisdom. I want you to know that you don't have to. In fact, I believe that none of us want to live a life that is marked by foolishness. The beginning of wisdom is when we fear God. And if you need wisdom, ask Him, receive it, and apply it in your life. You can't live without it.